One of the craziest things that you can do when it comes to stimulating the mind in regards to hockey conversation and prospects and youth and the future is to bring out the comparables. Not necessarily in terms of the points or the goals or the assists or any of that stuff, but impact comparables. In terms of watching a hockey team and acknowledging, wow, that guy out there, that's an impact player. And being able to comparatively observe and contrast how impactful of a player this guy is on a hockey team. Connor McDavid is extraordinarily important to the Oilers, but Leon Draisaitl is too. Who would you say is more important? That kind of thing. And so, as we talk about Ottawa Senators prospects, because yesterday we did speak about Shane Pinto, the guy who was nominated as one of the final three finalists, I should just say three finalists, for the Hobey Baker Award alongside of Dryden McKay and Cole Caulfield. If you want the scoop on Shane Pinto, we actually did have a very dedicated segment to Pinto and his overall success in yesterday's video. But today we're not talking about Pinto. Oh no, we're talking about another player on the UND Fighting Hawks who is also a Senators prospect and whose level of impact and comparison, if you take a look at the eyes of some people, could be seen as extraordinarily high. So much to the point that you already clicked on this video knowing who the comparables are, but I would rather just go out there and give a little bit of foreplay to the conversation at hand first before we dive straight in. So, Jake Sanderson, the 5th overall pick by the Ottawa Senators at the 2020 NHL entry draft. He was a guy that a lot of people at the beginning of the 2019-20 draft season did not really project towards being the first defenseman taken off the board. Had you asked the majority of scouts and fans and media back then in October-ish of 2019, they would have said that the first defenseman would probably have been Jamie Drysdale. Because he was a smooth skater with open hips, some very nice smooth open edge skating, and his passing ability was off the charts. But what Jamie Drysdale lacked in overall consistency away from the offensive zone and a willingness to succeed outside the offensive zone, Jake Sanderson had. Sanderson had that scouting report that was like, this guy is good everywhere. He is a dynamic skater. He's got a great stride. He's good at headmanning the puck up. He plays very well in his own zone. He may not be the guy to quarterback a power play like a Drysdale could. Drysdale probably might end his career off with more points than Sanderson, but the way these guys play, it would be no surprise if by the end of both of their careers, you could say that Jake Sanderson was the more dynamic, more engaged, and more just all-around tuned-up defender than Drysdale was. That was the perspective that a lot of people had at the end of the 2019-20 draft season after Sanderson had that crazy year with the US NTDP in 2019-20 where he posted up a very astonishing 29 points in 47 games played as the captain of the U18 team. But for Jake Sanderson going out there and spending his freshman year with the North Dakota Fighting Hawks alongside of Tyler Klevin, Jacob Bernard-Docker, Shane Pinto, other Ottawa Senators prospects in the pipeline, what we had was a very good first season for a guy who just broke into the NCAA as one of the youngest players in the 2020 draft at 18 years old. He had 15 points, 22 games played, 2 goals, 13 assists as a 6'1", 185-pound smooth skating left-handed defenseman. Here's an article from Sportsnet back in December talking about how exactly the Senators were using UND as a farm team for their top prospects. The interview was done here with UND head coach Brad Berry. This is what he has to say about Jake Sanderson. This interview was done before they actually had experience working with Sanderson because it was back in December, but even from the early practices, they had a very positive impression of what exactly it was he brought to the ice. For example, in practice, we did a 3-on-2 drill. Sanderson and his partner defending against 3 highly skilled forwards, and Sanderson was a breakout machine as far as getting to pucks first, picking pucks up out of traffic, and it's very encouraging. We haven't played a game yet, but he's got a lot of details to set himself up for success at the college level for sure. Jake Sanderson is an elite skater, Barry says. He gets up the ice and he joins the rush, very much so on breakouts and transition plays. Also, he's got a boomer of a shot. Okay, boomer. He's got a really great one-timer and a quick release to get pucks through to the net. He's going to get opportunities to get some goals, but to also set some up. And sets him up he did. 13 assists in 22 games played as a defenseman, as a rookie. I think that's pretty good, man. What about you? There's a reason this guy was taken 5th overall, and even though you could have that very long debate as to whether or not Jamie Drysdale or Sanderson should have been taken one over the other, or even if the other guys like Rossi or Perfetti should have been thrown into that conversation too, the fact is, this is the top Ottawa Senators defenseman prospect if you don't want to include Eric Bronstrom. This is a guy who will go out there and challenge Thomas Chabot for being that number 1 guy. And if we want to go over what exactly it is that made you click on this video, the comparables, as we said, value-wise, let's go over onto the Ottawa Senators subreddit. This is a podcast hosted by Chris Peters, Talkin' Hockey Sense, and the guest they have on this episode that was released on March 31st is Brad Schlossman. Now, who exactly is Brad Schlossman? He is a guy who has been covering the North Dakota Fighting Hawks for the past 17 years. And if you take a look at some of the articles that he has written in the past talking about these players, he's covered all the guys who have played for UND, and just from the body of work he has provided over the past near 2 decades, you can see that he knows what he's talking about. At the 35-minute mark of this podcast, there's a quote that was posted onto the Ottawa Senators subreddit that kind of got people a little bit excited. It sounds crazy, but in my 17 years here at North Dakota, Jake Sanderson may be the best player I have ever covered. And I've covered Toews and Oshie. Now, I put in another guy in there, in the title, in the thumbnail, Brock Besser. Yeah, he's covered Brock Besser too. Here are some articles back in 2015, 2016, when they talked about Besser and how good he was in his first year and second year. But there's the level of comparisons right there. The amount of value that a player can add to your hockey team. Now, of course, Jonathan Toews is a top center in the NHL. TJ Oshie is one of the shootout specialists in this generation who can go out there and get 30 goals. Jake Sanderson's probably never going to be a 30-goal guy in the NHL since he's a defenseman, but just the sheer impact of these players and how positively they can influence play, so much to the idea that one who has seen Toews and Oshie and Brock Besser and Schmaltz and Kajula and Troy Stetcher go through the UND ranks, being able to go out there and say, yeah, you know, they were all good, but that Jake Sanderson, man, he honestly might be the best of them all. That is a very, very big statement. And, you know, there really are a whole bunch of things you have to take a look at when it comes to a comparison like that, because for Jonathan Toews, first and foremost, let's take a look at what he was able to do in his year with the North Dakota Fighting Hawks. Jonathan Toews was over a point per game in his second year. He was a point per game flat in his freshman year, breaking into the college scene back in 05-06 and 06-07. TJ Oshie was on that team as well. He was way over a point per game during his heyday with the Fighting Hawks, and he went on to have a very good NHL career. Brock Besser, way over a point per game in his first year. Now, a lot of that had to do, I will say, with the fact that he was on the CBS line, Besser, Schmaltz, Kajula, and they had that really good offensive defenseman back there in Troy Stetcher that would go out there and help them. But Brock Besser, as a freshman, 18 years old, 60 points, 42 games played, 27 goals, dude. Wow. I mean, Mr. Brad Schlossman over here doesn't even mention Brock Besser in this little quote, but he does say it. In my 17 years here, Jake Sanderson may be the best player I've ever covered, even including the Toews and the Oshies out there. I would assume Besser is included in that boat as well. Imagine having a player so skilled and so good at what he does as a defenseman that if you're given the chance to go out there and start a team from scratch, a fantasy draft, whatever it is you want to say, you're given the chance to be like, okay, we need a player to be our guy. Who do you choose? Toews, Oshie, Besser, Tyson Jost, Schmaltz, Kajula, Sanderson. You say Sanderson. Imagine how good that guy is going to be if you can be in a position to be like, yeah, that's the best guy there. Especially for a beat reporter who has covered this team for 17 years. There's a lot of value here for Jake Sanderson, and even though it was seen as somewhat of a questionable pick back in the 2020 NHL entry draft in October, still, it's one that I wasn't really personally surprised by, especially with the fact that they took Tim Stützle 3rd overall, the Senators did. But hey, Chabot, Sanderson, these guys fighting for the top spot as your defenseman of the future, your number one defenseman of the future. I mean, Chabot's really good, but if Jake Sanderson lives up to the hype, then man, we will have some very big problems for the other Canadian teams out there and for all the other teams that play the Ottawa Senators on a regular basis in a regular season schedule. So is it true? I don't know, but I want you to tell me in the comments, what do you think? Jake Sanderson, I've always known, was a good player, but the magnitude of these comparisons is quite severe, so let me know in the comments what you think. Besser, Toews, Oshie, Sanderson? Same boat? Who knows? Talk to me in the comments what you think. I hope you enjoyed this edition of Schlossman 99. And bye.